So let me guess, you've clicked on this video because you've committed crimes against your bank account in the name of pulling for waifus again, haven't you? Or, even if you haven't, you've probably fallen head over heels for the fast-paced, flashy gameplay of the champion duelist of Fontaine herself. And I'm of course talking about none other than Clorinde. And you're wondering, how do I even build this electrifying character? And that's where I come in. Hey guys, my name is TableFlip64, and this is the only Clorinde guide you'll ever need. In this guide, I'm going to be going over her talents, builds, constellations, and team comps. Clorinde is an on-field Electro sword DPS whose kit revolves around Bond of Life, and her stance change that has phenomenal Electro application, high mobility, and tons of self-sustain. And while she may lack personal damage, she makes up for it with her sheer versatility that enables multiple playstyles and viable builds. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of how to build her, let's talk about how to play her.
Into the shadows.
Clorinde's normal attack, Oath of Hunting Shadows, is pretty much the standard fare. Just being a 5-hit combo and outside of it looking really cool, it's pretty much useless. The normal attack scalings don't affect your elemental skill, but hey, at least on the bright side you can save yourself some talent books. Clorinde's elemental skill, Hunter's Vigil, is the bread and butter of her kit. When activated, Clorinde pulls out her sidearm and gains an Electro infusion for 7.5 seconds. This is called the Night Vigil state. In this state, she can no longer use charge attacks and her normal attacks are converted to Swift Hunt pistolet shots, which when below 100% Bond of Life will do more damage, pierce enemies, and generate 35% Bond of Life per shot fired. When at 100% Bond of Life or higher, the pistolet shots lose damage and no longer generate Bond of Life, which then incentivizes you to use Impale the Knight instead, which is done by reactivating the skill button. Impale the Knight has 3 different versions based on the amount of Bond of Life you have. At 0%, it's just a normal lunge. At less than 100%, it's the same lunge but does slightly more damage, heals based off of the Bond of Life you have, and increases the AoE. And at 100% or greater, it does even more damage, the healing percent based off of Bond of Life is increased, and the AoE is increased even further. So with that in mind, the combo you'll want to use is N3E. However, while it is important to always try to get that, it's not always possible. And even though it doesn't have iframes, the dash from Impale the Knight has a lot of range, making it really good for repositioning and avoiding damage. Also, when the Night Vigil state is active, she can't be healed by sources other than Impale the Knight. However, 80% of the healing you would have received will be converted into Bond of Life. This potentially allows you to shorten your combos, however, it's pretty annoying to micromanage your Bond of Life, so you don't really have to worry about doing this. This also has the added benefit of increasing the healing that you get from Impale the Knight. Also, her pistolet shots can periodically trigger a Surging Blade that does Ossia line damage. Well anyways, that was a lot to cover for an elemental skill. Actually, the talent description is so long it might just be one of the longest, if not the longest, talent descriptions in the game. However, on the flip side, her elemental burst is probably a contender for one of the shortest talent descriptions in the game. Clorinde's elemental burst, Last Lightfall, does AoE electro damage and gives her Bond of Life based on her max HP. The animation for this looks pretty fucking insane too, and the burst actually does some really solid damage. Last Light is important to use every rotation, as starting at level 7, it gives you over 100% Bond of Life. This allows you to start off your rotations with over 100% Bond of Life, making the full combo QEE and then N3E spam. Clorinde has a short field time and big downtime issues, so using her burst every rotation can fill in the gaps. Clorinde's first Ascension passive, Dark Shattering Flame, makes it so when a party member triggers an Electro-related elemental reaction, the damage of Clorinde's normal attacks and elemental burst is increased by 20% for 15 seconds. This stacks up to 3 times for a total of 60% and caps at 1800 damage. So basically this talent just increases your scalings by up to 60% or until you hit the cap of 1800. To achieve this though, you would need 3000 attack. However, that's not really something you should actually aim for. Also keep in mind everything in your elemental skill is considered to be normal attacks. Clorinde's second Ascension passive, Lawful Remuneration, increases her crit rate. When at or above 100% Bond of Life, changes in Bond of Life will give you 10% crit rate for 15 seconds. This stacks up to twice for 20% crit. This passive also increases the healing to Bond of Life conversion from 80 to 100% when it's active. Her open world exploration passive, Night Vigil's Harvest, allows you to see Fontaine specialties on the minimap. I always personally really like these passives, so I don't have to stare at the Genshin interactive map all day. I know it seems like a lot of information, but at the end of the day, Clorinde's kit is actually pretty simple to understand. Because of how she's designed, she's very versatile. That versatility extends to her builds as well. So let's look at how to build her now.
Hunt them down!
We're gonna start by taking a look at her artifacts. Her best in slot is undoubtedly the new Harmonic Whimsy set. This gives her 18% attack and 54% damage bonus when fully stacked, and Clorinde can easily stack it through her normal gameplay, making it synergize super well. However, it's relatively new and rather inefficient to farm, so the next set I would like to bring up is a 4-piece Glad. Glad gives 18% attack as well, and 35% normal attack damage that is unconditional. And while the set may have lower damage than Harmonic, it's also easier to farm since you can get it passively and through the strongbox. Next up would be a 4-piece Thundering Fury. This set gives 15% electro damage bonus, more reaction damage, and the passive effect reduces your elemental skill cooldown by 1 second whenever you trigger an electro reaction. This has the potential to be one of her strongest sets in an Aggravate/Quickbloom team. Using this set can extend your rotation since you can use 2 E's. For Dendro teams you can also use Gilded Dreams, however it's not the greatest. I would really only run this set if you have a cracked amazing set. Marche Hunter can be good with Farina teams, however Clorinde already gets so much crit rate that it's easy to overcap with this set. And the last set worth mentioning is Echoes of an Offering. This set is technically one of her better options, however it isn't super worth farming and is pretty much garbage if you have more than 70 ping. Your 2-piece options are going to be attack percent, electro damage bonus, and normal and charge attack. Now let's take a look at main stats. For the Sands you're going to want to run attack most of the time, but if you're using Lo-Fi or playing a Quickbloom team, EM Sands will be better. As for your Goblet you'll want to run electro damage bonus, and for the Circlet you want either crit rate or crit damage, whichever one gets you to that golden 1-to-2 ratio. However, remember, Clorinde has a lot of crit rate in her kit already, so it's most likely you're going to want to run crit damage here. For substat priorities, it's going to be crit, attack percent, EM, and ER. And for the ER requirements, it's going to be anywhere from 100 to 150 based off of what Electro unit you're running with her. The reason I say it that way is you're always going to want to run a second Electro unit with Clorinde. Your best bet for a battery here is going to be Fischl, but I'll talk more about her team comps and teammates later. Also, it's worth leveling Clorinde to level 90 because of all the reactions you'll be doing. Now that we've looked at the artifacts, let's take a look at her weapons. A lot of her weapons are actually on par with each other, making it quite easy to find good weapon options. Clorinde's best in slot, to no one's surprise, is her signature weapon Absolution. This sword is a beast. It has the max base attack a sword can have, it gives 64 crit damage at R1, and the passive gives you up to 48% damage bonus just for playing Clorinde normally. This sword also has the best drip. The Haran Geppaku Fetsu is going to be her next best weapon. It gives 33% crit rate, so be careful not to overcap with it. It also gives 12 elemental damage bonus and up to 40% normal attack damage. After that is the Mistsplitter Reforged, which outside of Quickbloom teams is going to be your third best option. It has high base attack and 44 crit damage, as well as up to 28 elemental damage bonus at R1. Alright, the last 5-star I'm going to mention is the Light of Fuller Incision. However, the correct name for this sword is actually Lo-Fi. Anyways, Lo-Fi has low base attack, but gives an insane 88 crit damage and a hilariously small 4% crit rate. It increases your normal attack damage by 120% of your elemental mastery. Because of this, you'll actually want to run an EM Sands with Lo-Fi. Anyways, here are the 5-star weapon rankings. Now let's take a look at the 4-star/3-star options. The best 4-star and the only battle pass weapon worth using is the Black Sword. It gives almost 30% crit rate and it gives 20 to 40% normal and charge attack damage. It also heals every once in a while. However, it's not worth buying the battle pass specifically for Clorinde. Your best gotcha 4-star is going to be the Lion's Roar. It gives some nice attack and 20 to 36 damage bonus against enemies afflicted with Electro. That being said, if you don't want to / can't spend money on this game, Clorinde's best free-to-play option is the Finale of the Deep. It gives you 12 to 24% attack when you use your E, 25% Bond of Life, and attack that scales off of Bond of Life that can range anywhere from 150 to 300 flat attack. These numbers are based off of refinement. Additionally, if you're running a Quickbloom team, EM weapons like the Iron Sting or the Umbrella can be used instead. Here's the full lineup for 4-star/3-star weapons. Even at low refinement, the first 3 weapons are still stronger than most of the other weapons here. Hey guys, really quickly, I want to take some of your time and thank you for watching the video. Also, I'd like to ask you to like, comment, and subscribe. Subscribing really helps me and the channel out, but not only does it help me out, it also helps you out. You see, for every sub I get, the chance that Clorinde shows up to your house dressed like a bunny girl goes up. So if you want to make that happen, make sure you hit the sub button. Anyways, after that degeneracy, let's take a look at her constellations.
Time to testify.
Her C1 adds another source of damage that can also proc Aggravate. It's about a 20% increase in damage, or 25% for Dendro teams. Her C2 gives her interruption to resistance in the Night Vigil state and increases the scaling of her first Ascension passive. It's about a 50% damage increase across the board. Her C3 is 3 levels in her skill, it's about a 60% damage increase across the board. Her C4 increases her burst damage by up to 200%, and it's about a 180% damage increase, 170% for Dendro teams. Her C5 is 3 levels into her burst, it's about a 190% damage increase, or 180% for Dendro teams. And her C6 increases her crit rate / crit damage in the Night Vigil state, as well as adds yet another source of damage, similar to her C1. It's about a 280% damage increase, or 260% for Dendro teams. Across the board, these are some solid constellations that give quality of life changes, damage, and more ways to proc reactions. The best stopping points are C1, C2, and C6. Her C6 is actually a really solid increase, however, I don't really think it's worth becoming homeless for. Alright, now this is the moment you've all been waiting for, or you probably just skipped to, didn't you? I'm on to you. Anyways, as I've alluded to numerous times throughout the video, Clorinde has many viable team comps.
Need to hire a duelist?
So I know it's aggravating to, well, you know, always talk about Aggravate Teams, but that's where we're going to start anyways, as it's going to be the most consistent team for Clorinde to run. For Aggravate, you'll want to run a second Electro unit, the strongest of which is going to be Fischl. Clorinde's fast attack speed and high elemental application can really drive Fischl's Ascension 4 and Constellation 6, causing Fischl to do a lot of off-field damage. If you don't want to run Fischl, you can always use Yaimiko, who's very similar to Fischl, or Beidou for more AoE. Also, Beidou won't steal your Hyperbloom procs. For Dendro units, Nahida will be the premier pick. She has the highest Dendro application in the game, high personal damage, and a strong EM buff. However, you can also use the Dendro MC, who's kinda like a discount Nahida, or you can use Kale, who's surprisingly good. If you want a more defensive pick, you can use Yao Yao, who heals, Kirara, who shields, or Baiju, who does both. For the last 3 units I mentioned, keep in mind they have low Dendro application, which makes them kinda bad in Quickbloom teams. For Anemo units, Kazuha is going to be the best. He has strong grouping and a powerful elemental damage buff. Alternatively, you can run Sucrose, who has similar grouping and buffing potential. Jin or Sayu can be used for Anemo healers. Or if you want to run a flex unit, you can always use one of the more defensive Dendro units that I mentioned earlier, or if you just want to turn off all damage altogether, you can use Zhongli. He has the strongest shield in the game, universal resistance shred, and the ability to run either Tenacity or Archaea Petra. If you're more interested in Quickbloom teams, you can drop your Anemo / flex spot for a Hydro unit. Arena is going to be one of the best Hydro units to run with Clorinde, as she has tons of off-field damage from the boys, as well as an insane damage buff on her burst. Because of all of the self-healing that Clorinde has in her kit, she can easily stack Fanfare. Otherwise, you can run classic options like Xingqiu, who has good defensive utility, or Yelan, who has strong buffing potential. Both have tons of off-field damage and Hydro application. You can also run C6 Candace if you have her. Also, Quickbloom would be the best place for Kuki Shinobu to shine, so if you want to use her, this is the right team for it. Otherwise, let's take a look at Overload teams now. These teams are relying on Chevreus's Ascension passives and Constellation 6 to be viable. As a result, she's going to be a core member of the team. In addition to running Chevreus, you're going to want to run a second Electro unit like Fischl, Yaimiko, or Beidou, as well as a second Pyro unit like Bennett, who's infamous for his attack buff, Toma, who has very solid shielding, or Dea, who has a resistance to interruption buff and can hold tenacity of the Millilith. And lastly, I'm going to talk about Electro charge teams. In this team, you're going to want to run an Electro unit like Fischl, Yaimiko, or Beidou, a Hydro unit like Farina, Xingqiu, or Yelan, and an Animo unit like Kazuha, Sucrose, or even Jean. That about wraps things up for teams. Keep in mind this isn't a definitive list of units. Just because I didn't mention someone here doesn't necessarily mean they don't work. I just wanted to give you some general guidelines to work with. Also, since Clorinde is so new, there's bound to be more good teams discovered, and if I find anything interesting, I'll link it in a pinned comment down below. All in all, Clorinde's gameplay is pretty electrifying. It's fast-paced, flexible, and most importantly, it's actually pretty fun. That being said, I wish her elemental skill was more like Tartaglia's. I definitely prefer characters that have longer field times. Regardless, she's still fun and a very solid unit. So if you made it this far in the video, I want to thank you for watching. It really does mean a lot to me. Also, if you're interested in any of my sources, I have them linked down below. Anyways, adios, and try not to die.